Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend Marvin Silver, serve as the director of our Justice and Witness Action Network and associate conference minister with our Central Atlantic Conference, the United Church of Christ. Thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedule for joining us this evening for this first Faith and Democracy 2024 campaign training and strategy session, our first training session and strategy session for this particular campaign. I want to start the campaign out first by giving our new campaign organizer for this year's campaign, Laura Russell, an opportunity to introduce herself and say a few words before we jump right into our agenda for this evening. Laura, if you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure, thanks. My name is Laura Russell, and I just recently joined helping to work on this campaign. I also work part-time at St. Paul's in Westminster as their Director of Education. I'm very excited to be part of this group. Some of you I know from other social justice activities and education activities I've worked on, so it's great to see some familiar faces. And I know we're all concerned about making sure that everybody can participate in this upcoming election. And so we're here tonight to talk about how we can make that happen and what we can do to help you with your community.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. Thank you. And in the spirit of continuing with our introductions, we have another guest speaker with us this evening, although she's really not a guest because she is a UCC Justice leader in her own right. I want to give her an opportunity to introduce herself, and you will be hearing from her later in our agenda. Andrea Miller, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, Marvin. Good evening, everybody. I am Andrea Miller. I live in Ruther Glen, Virginia. So I am just north of the city of Richmond. My organization, Center for Common Ground, we provide election strategy and GOTV for the states of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Florida, Texas, and Arizona. And I am thrilled to be working with so many people who have been part of our postcard campaign, our phone campaign, and even our texting campaign. 2024 is, we always say it, an important election year. This year, we actually mean it.
Thank you, Andrea, and we look forward to hearing more from her as we move on with our agenda this evening. I want to encourage all of you, if you have not, please introduce yourself in the chat. We are asking that you give us your name, your church, your association, you know that, and just one reason why you are here this evening. One reason why you are here this evening. And with that, in the interest of time, we're going to move forward with our agenda for this evening. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Jumping right in, this year, our Justice and Witness Action Network, we launched our Faith and Democracy campaign as part of me preaching at Little River United Church of Christ in January as part of their Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration on Sunday morning. And it provided us an opportunity to really begin to lay the foundation, continue to lay the foundation for our justice movement centered around living into our vision and mission of being a powerful, faithful, and impactful organizing network to secure a just and compassionate world for all. I want to thank many of you for being faithful participants in this Faith and Democracy campaign going as far back as 2020 and working very closely with Andrea and Center for Common Ground as part of the postcarding that we did in the midst of a pandemic and with stay-at-home orders. We were still able to be very effective in engaging in nonpartisan civic engagement We will continue that work this year as part of our 2024 campaign, including encouraging you and organizing you to participate in voter registration, voter education and empowerment, get out the vote, and election protection activities as well. I think many of you can probably give your own sermon about why this year election is so important. But I hear every year, every election cycle, that this year is the most important election in everyone's lifetime. And I think we can say that once again this year. The very integrity and legitimacy of our governmental institutions are on the line. And we know that these institutions are necessary to ensure that we have a strong and a functioning democracy as a nation. A 21st century democracy, our vision, we believe is important for that to be diverse, because we know that it is growing with so many new citizens entering into this country, as well as a democracy that welcomes and protects every person's voice and participation, no matter who they are. And this is what we deserve as a nation. This is what we must demand, and this is what we should be fighting for this year. 2024 is definitely another daunting challenge and defining opportunity in the nation's history. The right to vote, fair and free elections, they are at stake. The foundations of our democracy, they are in danger. Many of you probably have been keeping up with the news of what's happening in states across the country. Laws are being passed to restrict and deny the right to vote, all under the false pretense of voter fraud and restoring election integrity, while ignoring the long history of voter suppression to limit participation of specific groups of people from voting so that they can negatively influence the outcome of those elections. And we are hearing continually in the US Congress, particularly in the US Senate, the same old arguments and rules being used to oppose voting rights legislation, the same arguments and rules that were used to oppose the civil rights movement and racial equity decades ago. And a key part of our work this year and moving forward will be advocating for federal legislation to advance and improve the Voting Rights Act and make voting more accessible to all across this country. And who can deny that January 6th shaped our country, shaped our nation, when we saw what we would call white supremacist individuals attack the foundation of our democracy, attacked our nation's capital, all under the false pretense that the elections was stolen. And we know that because of those actions and because of the ongoing lies, the ongoing deceit around what really happened that day presents us with the moral imperative to take action against the growing threats to our democracy. Coming together, I believe, as a people of faith to organize and fight for justice, that we can ensure that our nation doesn't become an authoritarian state or move closer to fascism, but instead moves closer to a truer democracy. That's the case for this campaign this year, and our work will continue to be grounded in being nonpartisan, as well as organizing ourselves around faith and democratic principles of valuing, informing, and affirming the voice and dignity of all, especially the least of these among us, and the belief that every person has a right to participate fully, freely, and fairly in the democratic process, without fear, without intimidation, limitations, and false information. So the goals of our campaign are pretty simple, pretty straightforward, no different than our past Faith and Democracy campaign. Our goal is to empower and support infrequent voters, the poor, people of color, and first-time voters to participate in the 2024 presidential, congressional, and statewide and local elections in our conference geographical boundaries. But not only that, we hope to also engage in voter outreach in low voter turnout and disenfranchised community and geographic areas outside of the conference boundaries in partnerships with organizations like Center for Common Ground and others. This campaign will honor the voices of our network members, and where 2 years ago, they overwhelmingly voted that for our first federal issues campaign, that we would prioritize voting rights advancement and combating voter suppression. So again, connected this campaign to the very foundations of what it means to be a democracy. We will be advocating for and calling for federal voting rights legislation to be considered and to be passed in the U.S. Senate. This campaign cannot be effective if it isn't local church based. And that's why we are happy that so many of you are here on tonight's training, because this campaign is grounded in the work that needs to happen within our local churches. So we are hoping to organize faith and democracy teams in local churches that will participate in this campaign. And that leads me to jump right into encouraging you, if you have not yet, but you're here at the training, but you have not yet, we ask that you would join the Faith and Democracy campaign now if you have not already. You can go to letjustice.org/join to join the campaign now. With that, I want to take a few minutes to highlight that we have an organizing manual to help guide you in this process of participating in this campaign. And then you also have myself and Laura, who will be available to work closely with each of your local churches to make sure that your campaign is a success and that you're engaged in this campaign in unity with other UCC churches, but also with our ecumenical, interfaith, and our secular partners. We want to help build the foundation for future local justice ministries by using this campaign to really build a base of leaders in your local church that engages the entire church in this campaign, but also in what it means to be a justice church. But in order for us to engage in nonpartisan political activity or nonpartisan civic engagement, we must be very clear about the do's and the don'ts of what we can and can't do in an election year. And if you have a copy of the organizing manual already open, because it was shared with everyone who joined tonight's call, if you turn to page 7 and 8, we highlight the guidelines on political activity for churches and for clergy. The good thing to know is that you as a local church, you are a nonprofit 501c3 organization. And it's federal election law that gives guidance to what you can and cannot do. And it states that any educational, religious, or charitable organization is prohibited from engaging in partisan political activity. Local churches may not support or oppose any candidate for public offices. This also includes making a financial contribution to and endorsing candidates for public office. But here's what we can do. Clergy and local churches can engage in nonpartisan political activity. And what is nonpartisan political activity? It's the very thing that we're hoping to engage with you in this campaign. It's voter registration. It's voter education and empowerment. And it's getting out the vote, encouraging people to go to the polls and to cast their vote. And we have some goals and some strategies around the work that we hope to do together throughout this campaign. And I want to take a few moments now to sort of talk about what that includes and what we will be working on together as a network. Again, a reminder, page 7 and 8 of the organizing manual gets into the details of the do's and don'ts of political activity for clergy and churches. So I encourage you to spend some detail moments looking at what's in on those 2 pages. The right to vote means nothing if citizens don't have access to it and are not registered. And voter registration is a prerequisite, I believe, to voting. And every citizen of this nation should have full access to the voting booth to cast her or his vote, to make his or her voice heard, and to have a guarantee that her or his vote will count. And one of the most effective ways to fight voter suppression is to register people to vote. So one of our primary goals of our campaign is voter registration, engaging each of you in voter registration. We want to have 100% voter registration within our local churches. We make no assumption that everyone in the local church who is a member of your local church is registered to vote. And in fact, it's imperative that even if you are a consistent voter, that you should check your voter registration status, because it has been proven that over the last decade or more, that efforts, unfortunately, by elected officials in terms of their attempt to so-called clean the voter rolls or make improvement to the voter rolls are kicking eligible voters off of the voting rolls. And then those voters find themselves without the ability to vote when election time comes, or they have to cast a provisional ballot and wait and see whether or not their vote really counted. So it's important for everyone here this evening, everyone in your local church, not only to make sure that you're registered to vote, but to check your voter registration status to make sure it's correct. But then also, we want to make sure that we reach out to those individuals in our communities, such as first-time voters, the poor and low wealth, and communities of color, and other infrequent voters in the surrounding community and state of our local church. So that's at the heart of our campaign, is voter registration, making sure people are registered to vote. And we're encouraging you, before you engage in voter registration, that your very first act is to organize a faith and democracy team. Vision is the driving force that leads to your faith into action. And organizing provides direction to guide you toward your purpose and make your vision for ministry a reality. Organizing without a vision is only a dream deferred. So combining the two, intentional planning and organizing, is important for your faith and democracy team and your voter registration efforts. So step one, we're encouraging you to identify some team members, create a team of an appropriate size to be effective. We recommend a leadership team of 5 to 7 members for a local church of approximately 150 members or less. And then of course, you can increase that based upon the size of your local church. And this team serves or should serve to organize the local church's overall engagement in the Faith and Democracy campaign this year. If your local church has a team or a committee that's focused on the work of justice in some form or fashion, then that team can serve as your Faith and Democracy team for this particular campaign. No need to create additional structures. If there's time and energy amongst those leaders to do this work, we encourage you to have that team to prioritize this campaign for this year. If you have the capacity and energy to bring together new leaders to build a new team, then we encourage you to do that. Again, the heart of any team, any committee, is to make sure that you have a strong team leader who will provide direction and overall leadership for the campaign and to coordinate your voter registration drive. So if possible, identify someone who has led a justice or a voter registration drive before. And your team leader hopefully will be the one that will stay connected with myself and Laura and others who will be taking leadership responsibilities in the campaign as we share updates, as we do more training, and as we bring everyone together for strategy, conversations, and for overall organizing and mobilizing. We outline on page 10 and 11 and 12 how to organize your Faith and Democracy team. But to share a little bit further, we encourage you in the context of that team to make sure that you have these positions or these roles that people can play for that team. Have a volunteer lead, someone who can recruit volunteers and set up volunteer trainings and the schedules. And this person should be well organized. It assumes, of course, dependable and detail-oriented, and of course, someone who's friendly. And they support the volunteers during the voter registration drive. That's what we envision for this work. Have someone who can serve as a materials lead, someone who ensures that your voter registration forms, your state voter information from your local board of elections, pens and pencils, name tags, because one of the hopes that we have this year, now that we're not under stay-at-home orders, is that we can actually engage in voter registration in person. And although many state governments are allowing voter registration to happen online, we still are encouraging you to do voter registration in person, to have a tablet or your phone right out there in the public and having folks to sign up to register to vote rather electronically. So that opportunity is available to your team as well. A facilities lead, someone who can ensure that the location of your voter registration drives are happening with other organizations and that things are in place as you look to do that work at that particular location. Also consider someone who can be a transportations lead, making sure that there's transportation for your volunteers for your voter registration drive, as well as to support those in your local community where you may want to provide transportation to those to get to the polls. And we'll get to a little bit of that a little bit later in the campaign. And then finally, someone who can help you with fundraising overall. We don't make assumptions here that this work happens without the critical resource of dollars. So someone on your team who can be responsible for helping your team and your congregation to raise funds necessary for your work to happen. Again, we want you to set some goals and a timeline. We want you to be clear, realistic, and set some attainable goals, of course, and consider the important questions of who, what, when, where, how many, how much, and how long. And a good organizer understands the importance of the changing circumstances and the impact of your plan. So being adaptable is critically important. And it goes without saying, please be in touch with your Secretary of State or your local Board of Elections office to get briefed on your local and state election laws. Knowing the deadlines and the rules for voter registration will assist in the development of your goals and your timelines. In fact, getting to know your elected officials at your local Board of Election is critical to everything that you would do in this campaign. So this is an evangelism moment to be in relationship with those who serve in the local Board of Elections, not to have them to join your church, but to build relationship, to do good work. And that is to make sure citizens have the information that they need to be an active citizen and to vote in the upcoming elections. I cannot stress enough the importance of this step of getting to know your state board, your local Board of Elections. They will help you in so many ways as you move forward in this campaign. They will help you in terms of providing with voter registration forms, how to do voter registration. And in fact, Laura, can you take a moment and talk a little bit about what happens in some jurisdictions in regards to people being trained or being certified in doing voter registration?
I lost where my mute button was, but here I am. Yes, so I just want to emphasize again that getting to know your local person. I will tell you that each state has a very comprehensive website and each county has a very comprehensive website. So I think the first step I would encourage you to do is click through those and see where all the information is. The other thing is that you will want to be in touch with your county's election committee to find out how to become a registrar. I live in Carroll County, Maryland, and I have to actually physically call them to find out about getting a training. There was nothing online other than that it says to call them. So, I think as Marvin also emphasized, a lot of it you can register online. But as we also know that that's not always easy for a lot of people to do. So you want to learn about not only how do you become a registrar, but then what do you need to do to register people, whether there's still, papers and pens you could take out that people could fill in, or if everybody has to go online to register. The other thing is everybody, at least in the state of Maryland, I know you're able to register when you renew your driver's license, and that's actually where the highest numbers of registrations come from. So if you have a local MVA near you, that's another avenue for people to register. So like I said, I really encourage you, one, to check out the the websites, and two, to make, make any effort you can to visit your election board and meet your new people. And also, in many cases, you can sign up to receive information from them on updates and things electronically. So I encourage you to do that as well.
Thank you, Laura. And we will be following up with you on that particular piece, because one of the things we will be encouraging this year for our local churches participating in this campaign is to make sure that you have 2 people at minimum in your church who are certified to do the voter registration, if it's a requirement in your state. So we will be following up with you with specific information on that. To move along around this Faith and Democracy team, we want to encourage you to identify some strategic partners locally, and we will be supporting you in that regard as well. I think the key piece to note here is that we as a network operating under our principles in the belief that we must do this work in coalition and partnership with other organizations, that we encourage you to identify local organizations or statewide organizations who have presence and capacity within your area where your local church is located, to partner with them in doing voter registration. An organization that has a track record, a credible track record in doing nonpartisan voter registration work. You want to sign up volunteers to be a part of your campaign, and you can do that both in terms of those who are members of your church. Your church hopefully has relationships with community groups in your local community, so you can use that as a potential place where you can sign up volunteers as well. And then if you can at all possible, try to launch your Faith and Democracy campaign. We encourage you to do as part of the worship service or after worship service, just highlighting the work that you all will be doing as a local church, and then starting the process of doing your voter registration, kicking off your voter registration drive as you launch your campaign. So let me move on to voter education and empowerment, and then I'll pause to see if there's specific questions that we can take at that time. Another key part of our work is voter education and empowerment. And we have 2 goals for this part of our initiative, and that is to invigorate positive attitudes and behaviors among voters and potential voters toward the electoral process. And we also want to increase knowledge about the issues around the election and the importance of voting. That same audience for this work should be those who you register to vote. That same audience, that's the goal of our voter registration efforts. And we highlight on page 16 and page 17 of the organizing manual some important voter education activities that you and your congregation can consider to organize in order to do this work effectively. You can do things such as organizing a candidate forum, and we will be able to support you in that. You can distribute voter locations and election day information as part of any community-wide event or things that you may do at your own local church, either after worship on Sunday morning or any ministry and mission activity that you have. You can actually, again, if you do a great job of establishing a relationship with your local board of election, you can invite them out to your local church or to any event that you're doing in partnership with an organization to do a voting machine demonstration. I can't stress the importance of this, particularly for new voters, so that they may understand how to navigate that process, as well as use that opportunity to educate those who will participate in the event about voting precinct locations, because those things oftentimes change from each election cycle. You can also organize an issues forum on an issue or several issues that are important to either a local election in your community or a statewide election. And of course, there's numerous issues that we can highlight as part of the congressional and the presidential election in this year. And then of course, we will stress the importance of holding any educational event around election laws, as well as how people can identify voter suppression. So educating people on the tactics or the tools of voter suppression is important so that they can make sure that their vote is not suppressed and they are being protected as they engage in the process. So let me pause right here before we move on to other sections of the organizing manual of the campaign, just to see if there are any campaigns. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see everyone. Are there any questions that you have at this particular time on anything that we have shared? Please raise your hands if you can, or unmute yourself and ask your question. Derek Hodge, go ahead. Briefly, please.
Thank you, Reverend. Yes, I'll be brief. I'm in Delaware, and there's no, we're not on the fence. We're clearly going to go in one direct. Our state is going to go Democratic every federal election, and there's been no efforts here to disenfranchise people. How do I get folks enthusiastic about this work when they might as well just say, well, we really don't have a problem here? We don't need to do this kind of work here in Delaware. How would I respond to that?
That's a good question, Pastor. I would say that that you must be careful to not assume that because a person is Democrat, that they are going to do the right thing on issues that you are concerned about. That you need to hold them accountable and question them on their positions on the issues, and state your demands in the context of engaging in conversations and pressing them on positions that they need to take, and representing their local officials over and above the special interests, particularly corporate interests that are oftentimes so heavily present in controlling the hearts and minds of those who are seeking public office. So don't make an assumption just because you're in a heavily Democratic Party area that there's no work to be done. You can show the strength of your local community by how many people you turn out to vote. You can show the strength of your local community by raising up important issues that are probably not being discussed in the electoral debate. And you can also press those elected officials to take positions that you know they should be representing because they represent the people as part of their campaign platform. So there's work to do in the state of Delaware. So I would encourage you to respond in that way, and we can support you in organizing in that area. And then, of course, for the work, to model the work that we did back in 2020, we will have an opportunity to provide voter engagement activities in our partnership with Center for Common Ground to do important work in other electoral races outside of Delaware, outside of the conference boundaries, where we know oftentimes voter suppression happens at a very high rate, and it tries to keep particular groups of people from voting in the electoral process. So you'll be hearing more about that, if not tonight, definitely in the weeks to come. We have Kat, if that is your name, and then we have Gail.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Reverend Kat, but Catherine Page from Empowerment Liberation Cathedral. Bishop Allison April is our bishop. My question is, how do I get the manual? Because I did not receive it in the emails. I have looked quite a few times and I don't see an attachment.
Okay, what we're going to do right now is put in the chat a link for you and everyone else to access the campaign manual.
Thank you so very much.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. Gail?
Yes, I just wanted to echo your comments about working on campaigns that are outside of our boundaries. This will be our 4th year in this Faith and Democracy Initiative, and we've written postcards through the Center for Common Ground to voters in states all over, mostly the Southeast, where people tend to be marginalized and there's a lot of voter suppression. So don't have blinders that you have to work in your own state. There are plenty of opportunities to reach beyond your own state to help with voter engagement.
Exactly. Thank you, Gail, for stressing that critical point. All right, I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to continue on with the rest of our training so that we can get done, and hopefully everyone can still see my screen. All right. Let's move on to probably one of the most exciting parts of nonpartisan civic engagement, and that is getting out the vote. The number one goal for any nonpartisan civic engagement work is to get out the vote, which is to mobilize voters to vote. And we were going to have a number of resources and tools that will be available to help you with that, as well as we will be doing this work in partnership with many organizations such as Center for Common Ground. In the organizing manual on page 19, 20, and 21, we highlight the importance of getting out the vote and shifting at this particular point. And when we talk about getting out the vote, we're talking about not just in terms of the general election, we're also talking about the ongoing primary elections that are happening in many regions across the Central Atlantic Conference geographical boundaries. The primary season is still upon us, and you still can get out the vote. And for many elections or particular races, the primary election really determines who is going to be the party representative for that particular office. So engaging voters to vote in the primary election is just as important and just as critical in the general election. But when it comes to the general election, we are encouraging our faith and democracy teams. You will be hearing more about this as we move to that point in the campaign, to remember your voter registration goals and start with your local church and the people that you have registered. Hopefully, if you're engaging in voter registration, you're being very effective in keeping track of those individuals that you have registered, and there's ways of doing that without breaking any laws, such as having them sign up to a separate form. Some jurisdictions I know in the past would allow you to Xerox copy the voter registration forms. I'm not sure if you can still do that in many jurisdictions, but there's a way to get their contact information so that you can stay in touch with them and make sure that they get out the vote. Again, can't stress enough as you prepare to do this work, always be in touch with your local Board of Elections about the elections laws, when it's voting, particularly in this age where early voting tends to happen a lot in many jurisdictions. Where are the voting locations in your community? And remembering that in early voting, the precincts are different than they are on election day. So making sure that you have that important information. And don't forget that this is your opportunity to mobilize those voters that are at the heart of our campaign. Those are the infrequent voters, new voters, the poor and low wealth, and particularly communities of colors. So what we have done as part of this Get Out the Vote initiative for this campaign, starting on page 19, we've laid out a 10-week Get Out the Vote initiative and a plan of action already there sitting and waiting for you and your faith and democracy team to put together your Get Out the Vote initiative in partnership with other UCC local churches and our ecumenical, interfaith, and secular partners. I won't go into the details of that particular campaign, that particular 10-week initiative, but at the heart of that is our Faith and Democracy Sunday, which has been a highlight and success of our campaign over the last few campaigns of our faith and democracy campaigns. And this year, we've already designated that Faith and Democracy Sunday will be Sunday, September 22nd. Sunday, September 22nd. And this is an opportunity for you as a local church to come together in the context of worship, to celebrate and highlight the success of your campaign to this point. You have an opportunity to engage your worship team, your minister, in the context of worship, and from a biblical and theological perspective, why it's important to vote and why it's important for the faith community to be involved in the electoral process. And then there's also an opportunity for you to use that Faith and Democracy Sunday almost as a get out the vote rally, where you have the opportunity to sort of energize people for the final weeks as you move forward to Election Day, the final day of voting. That's how we have to look at that in this season, in this time where early voting gives many citizens a chance to vote and have access to the ballot, to their ballot earlier rather than later. So the next part of our campaign is election protection. And this work is really about us making sure that you are connected to and have the critical piece of information around a initiative that comes out of the National Civil Rights Organizations that created this initiative after the 2000 debacle, which is to find ways to protect voters' right to vote, so that when you show up to the election, to the polls, that you can cast your vote and that you can make sure that your vote is counted. And at the heart of that initiative is an 866 number, 866 our vote, that no matter where you are in the country, on election day or even before election day, you can call that number and get the support you need as a citizen to make sure that you can cast your ballot and that your ballot counts. Again, we already talked about our work around voting rights advancement and combating voter suppression. It's going to be a key component of our work. We will be highlighting this issue as part of our voter education and empowerment initiative, and we will be highlighting other issues as well. But this is primarily one of the ones that we will be highlighting in the context of our work throughout this campaign. Again, sign up if you have not done that yet. We encourage you to do that, to join the campaign now, to join the more than 200 justice leaders and clergy and more than 55 local churches who have been participating in this campaign since 2020. So we're excited about that level of participation. And again, this year we want to deepen that participation beyond the work that we have done, mostly behind closed doors from our homes. We want to be out in public, rubbing elbows, getting out in the streets and doing this work in partnership with many other like-minded organizations. So what I want to do right now is it's about 7:17. I want to sort of take a brief pause and provide an opportunity for our guest speaker, Andrea Miller, to share with us the work of Center for Common Ground in this particular election season. And then Laura and I will come back and just talk a little bit about sort of the strategy that we envision us employing as part of our collective work in our regions of different regions of the conference with our state and regional action network. So let me stop sharing my screen right now, and I'm going to turn it over to Andrea to share with us for a few minutes.
Oh, all right. Well, again, thank you so very much, Reverend Marvin and team. I've been really busy in the chat because Virginia is a very odd place. So we probably are very different from all the other states. What I'm going to do is very quickly walk you through a little presentation all about what we do, where we've done it, and what we're doing in 2024. As you can see, when you look at the map on the right, we do a lot of work. We are focused on the Southeast. Virginia, going down the Atlantic coastline, coming all the way over. Actually, this year, we're going all the way west to Texas. We have a very simple mission, and that is to empower underrepresented voters in voter suppression states We all know who those are. There's other states. I mean, Wisconsin is doing a pretty darn good job too, but predominantly we work in this other states. And the goal is working together, we can build a democracy that prioritizes the voices of all people. Now, in 2020, we contacted 14 million voters. 9.4 million got postcards, 2.9 million got text messages, 1.7 million got phone calls. In 2024, now that we have 75,000 volunteers instead of 55,000, our goal is to contact 18 million voters, 12.5 million by postcard, 3.5 million by text message, 2.5 million phone calls. And if you have not seen our postcards, these are Center for Common Ground postcards. They are famous if you're progressive, infamous if you're on the other side. Now, in doing voter registration this year, we're going to need to approach it slightly differently than we have in other years. The question is not, are you registered to vote? Because people are going to say, yes. The question is your voter registration still active? Because in Virginia and in many other states, you have bad actors that are going to county election offices and they are demanding that people be kicked off the rolls. Normally, the people are going to be poor. They may be our military or voting by mail. They may be disabled people who are on permanent vote by mail. And they will probably also be people who have not voted in the last couple of elections. People's voter registration is being challenged and people are being dumped off the rolls and they are not being notified. So it is very, very critical, as Reverend Marvin said, that you check on your own registration and on family members. Now, in Virginia, because we have the Virginia voter file through a very generous vendor, any church that wants access to be able to look and see, are all the members of my congregation registered? We can make that happen for you, where you can just sit, put in their names, and it's going to come back. Yes, their status is active. You're also going to get their voting history, and it's also going to show you their registration address. And if you know, wait a minute, they don't live there anymore, you're going to want to reach out to that voter and have them update their voter registration. So is your voter registration still active? Is your voter registration up to date? And if you are in Virginia, you must be certified to register voters using paper. If people have a DMV driver's license or a Virginia state issued ID, they will be able to register to vote online. If they don't, they can only begin the process online. They're going to need to print their registration, sign it, and send it in. Next, there are some marvelous tools that every person here should get. What you're looking at is a tool called ActiVote. Most people have no idea who their US representative is. They may know who their senator is, but most people do not know who their US rep is. And then once we start talking state Senate, state House, absolutely no clue. What I love about ActiVote is it takes you under officials from the president all the way down to your county officials, including justices. And it's free. So it is telling me I've got a primary on June 18th in 14 weeks, and I will be choosing candidates for US House District 7. So all of my officials, as well as everybody that's going to be on the ballot, and then just for funsies, daily civics quiz. In Virginia, if you approach someone and you talk to them about voter registration and they say, I'm not registered, and they seem a little intractable on that, it's normally because either A, they are not a citizen, or B, they have a felony conviction. Virginia has had 3 governors, not the current one, but 3 previous governors that were very aggressive in restoring the rights of people with prior felony convictions. At restore.virginia.gov, you have the ability to help someone check and see, have their voting rights been restored? We used to do a lot of clinics, and what always broke my heart was 80% of the people coming through our restoration of rights clinics, their rights were restored years ago. They just never knew. Now, our plans. Center for Common Ground, we do outreach to underrepresented voters. And what I have here is I've just got some maps where it says in Virginia in 2024, we have 865,362 registered Black voters, and they are 15.13% of the population of Virginia. And you can see there's an area there kind of in the middle where not a lot of blue dots, meaning there are not a lot of Black voters in that area. It's always interesting to look at a state and see where their voters are. We are working in 5 contested congressional primaries. We're working in District 2, that's in Hampton Roads. District 5, think Charlottesville, a little of Chesterfield, Amelia County, and the old tobacco counties. District 7, started Caroline, where I live, goes straight up I-95 to Prince William County. District 1, think the Eastern Shore. And District 10, we have a record number of 21 candidates running for Congress in District 10. We are working on primaries because what we've discovered is if we can get a voter who is inconsistent, and voters of color, 75% of them do not vote in primaries ever. If we can get a voter to vote in a primary, we now have an 80% shot that they are vested and they are going to come back and vote in the general. So people say, why are you doing primaries? One of the other things, now a lot of this is about Virginia for the moment. Virginia has 45 days of early voting. The problem in Virginia is there is no place on the Virginia elected website where you can see all 133 of Virginia counties and where all of their early voting locations are. We took care of the problem. We built the early voting list for Virginia, where you can search by a county if they have multiple early voting locations. Look at Arlington, they will all be listed. And then we will give the address, the date and time, the phone number that they are open. We will give Saturday voting, and if they have Sunday voting, that will be listed as well. Now, what we did, for those of you that are in Virginia, we have an app called Outreach Circle, and I just happen to have an extra circle. So Act to Vote, register to vote online, check, has a person's voting rights been restored, restore.virginia.gov. We put all of that on the app along with information about broadband coverage in Virginia and how high school students can pre-register to vote. And this is the link to the app. Now, I'm going to give this to Marvin at the end of my presentation, and he can make it available to the Virginia team, or actually the whole team that is on this call. This is the part about Virginia. And then we go into the great state of Georgia. And when you look at this map, look at the voters in Atlanta. I mean, Atlanta is almost solid blue. 33.77% of the voters in Georgia are Black. Georgia just redistricted, and we have the new maps, something that the Georgia Secretary of State has not chosen to install. And the Georgia congressional primary is May 18th. So the team that I have in Georgia, we are looking at, are we going to have to be part of a lawsuit because the state still has not corrected the maps? So when people go to my voter page in Georgia, many of them, if you're Black, are going to show up as still being in their old congressional district, and that is no longer true. Their districts have moved. In Georgia, we're looking at 2 districts that experienced the greatest shift. And mainly, we want to let voters know you are now in a different district than where you were previously. District 6 used to be down here, and now it's kind of moved. So we just want to let voters know you're in a new district. The work that we do in elections, our nonpartisan turnout, makes a big difference. Now, in 2020, we did a lot of work in Georgia with our partners at Georgia Team Unity. And I want you to notice the turnout number, 196,000. In 2018, we did not work in 2018. The number was 155,000. And the presidential election before that in 2016 was 150,000. So in 2022, a non-presidential year, they dropped down to 159,000. It will be our goal to reach that 196,000 mark and go above it. That would be 51% of the Black voters in Fulton County, the largest county with the number of Black voters in Georgia. We want more than 51% to turn out and vote. You're going to get this from Marvin. It will give you a headache. But I also did an analysis on, all right, out of that 159,000 voters that showed up, what age were they? And just looking at the 18 to 24 column, you can tell that is really where we need to see a big improvement in voter turnout. There's a lot of offices on the ballot in Georgia, all their House district, their entire state Senate, and their entire state House. They've got 4 Supreme Court justices and 6 appellate court justices and a bunch of school board races. So there is a lot at stake in Georgia. Now, Another favorite state, North Carolina. Again, Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, very large collection of Black voters, also Greensboro and Fayetteville. So a lot of offices on the ballot in North Carolina. Governor, lieutenant governor, their statewide offices, and some very, very, very important state commissioners, as well as their General Assembly and Supreme and Appellate Court. Biggest counties in North Carolina for Black voters, Mecklenburg, Wake, Guilford. And this is going to be very interesting as well. We did not work in North Carolina in 2022. So if you look at the difference in turnout, they went from 163,000 voters, or 67% of the Black voters, to 40%, 97,000 in 1 year. Your work makes a huge difference. What was the difference? We postcarded 1.2 million voters in Mecklenburg County, actually all the Black voters in North Carolina, twice. First, we did pledge to vote and take 5 people with you. And then we did get out the vote. And then Alabama. We love working in Alabama. Alabama has a brand new Black congressional district, CD2. They were ordered to redistrict and they completed that work in October. We discovered 2 weeks before the election that the systems that many campaigns use, including the National Democratic Party, the only time I'm going to say that word, the system they used to do outreach to voters had not updated the map. I had to call them and say, your maps are wrong. You must update your maps. And so they finally did. But many people were given the wrong information and told that they were in the wrong congressional district. So we worked in District 2. You've seen our postcards, and now in 2024, we will again be rolling out See Something, Say Something. If you've ever called the 866 hotline, you know that once they answer the phone, you could be sitting on that line for 10, 15 minutes. So what we tell people is call the hotline and then open up our app, fill out what the problem is, take a picture of it, and then press submit. It then goes to our servers where it gets placed on a map. And that allows us to analyze, are we seeing a particular type of election problem in a particular locality, or what is going on? We also keep the information so that we can compare 2024 with 2020. Are we seeing the same things in the same places? So election problem reporting. And Marvin, I love that you said rides to the polls. We have an app for that, where we, in our phone banking, in our text banking, on our postcards, we ask people if they need a ride to the polls. We have operators who get back in touch with those voters. We find out when they want to go and vote. And then we have every polling location in the state loaded under our app. The people who are driving just click on the rider's name and it will give them turn-by-turn directions on how to get to their voter. Once they get to the voter, it tells them where that voter is going to vote. When they click on that location, it gives them turn-by-turn directions on how to get them to their polling location. So we talked about canvassing, but what's very important about our canvassing is we aren't talking about candidates. We are reminding voters about what they told us were important issues and what they cared about. So what shows up on these palm cards ends up being on our canvassing cards under why I'm voting. I'm voting too. If there are free rides to the polls, we want to put that phone number or the website in. Whatever locality they're voting in, we're going to put where they vote for early voting, the address, when it's open. We're going to have the phone number of the registrar in the event they have any questions. We're going to have the vote writer's voter ID card. This is what you need to be able to vote. Now, Virginia has same-day voter registration. That note will be on there, along with if you register and vote the same day, it's going to be a provisional ballot. They're not going to let you do a regular ballot. And then we will add the link under report voting problems. We will have the link to see something, say something. We do phone banking every year. We have training on how to use our phone banks every week. I spoke with the Bay Area Coalition every Tuesday, don't know, every Saturday, don't know the time yet. We will be doing phone bank training. Your training will be about 20 minutes, and after your 20 minutes of training, you may then continue to make calls. Our phone banks are open 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. You will be able to make calls whenever you want. You make calls from your web browser. So just like you can talk over Zoom, that is how you talk to voters. Voters never get your phone number. That is protected. And the phone number that voters see is an actual physical phone that I own. I own 8 phones. So that if a voter calls, we actually have someone who goes through the phones every day and returns those voters' calls. And here's my information. Thank you all so very much. I forgot to add the state of Texas because we will be working in the great state of Texas along with South Carolina. But I got so wrapped up in generating those numbers that I didn't quite have time to get the Texas and South Carolina numbers in. So Marvin, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Andrea, and we appreciate the great work that you do, and we are looking forward to the work that we would do together as part of this ongoing partnership as we do nonpartisan civic engagement work together. All the information that was shared, that information will be made available to you. We've already invited Andrea to be a part of our next meeting with the co-chairs of our State Action Network organizing team in the teams in the coming weeks as we look to connect each of you and your local church to that broader network in your state. So you're doing this work in collaboration with other UCC local churches and of course our partners as we solidify those relationships for the campaign this year. I want to take just a few more minutes just to sort of highlight some important details and information as part of our work moving forward. In DC, our strategy for this year's campaign is going to be organizing our network members. That includes our local churches, justice leaders, and clergy to participate in the campaign. Again, we want to organize faith and democracy teams as part of this effort. And then we also want to identify leaders, clergy and justice leaders who can be a part of our prophetic voices for justice to highlight key election year issues and share those voices across our campaign's work. We also want to highlight this important election information. I'm going to ask Laura to do these slides for us as they come up and just highlight the key dates for voting in the jurisdictions.
Sure. So those of you who are in DC, as you know, you have two different primaries. The Republicans was on March 3rd, and the Democrats are coming up on June the 4th. And you can see the voter registration deadlines there. You can register in person, but then you will be doing a provisional ballot until it's they verify that you're not double voting. All registered voters are going to receive a ballot automatically, which is unusual. Not many states have that. But then it has it has to be postmarked by that date, or they can drop it off in different boxes that they'll have around in the city. So that's kind of a highlight of DC. And then the general election, as we all know, will be November the 5th, which will be the same for everybody. Again, there is same-day voter registration for a provisional ballot. You have to register to vote by the October the 15th. So that's really important to keep in mind when you're backing out your plan for getting people registered. There's also early voting registration, October 25th through November 3rd. And I'll echo what's been said several times here, is to remember that most times early voting locations, precincts are different than they are on the election day. And so that's something to help educate people about, that they need to know where they're going to go to vote. And then also, again, everybody gets a ballot automatically. So it has to be postmarked or dropped off by election day, November the 5th. So our strategy is organizing your local churches, your justice leaders, your clergy. Look at getting your teams together, your leadership in your teams, what your priorities your teams want to set, and how you're going to reach those goals. I encourage everybody to set some specific goals. I think we had a great presentation there saying, we want to reach this number of voters, or we want to send out this many postcards. And then I think the prophetic voices is really important. We want people to be able to get out there and share their experiences, share why it's important to get people out, and make sure that you're making a plan for what you can do within your church and in your pulpit to encourage all of that.
And Laura, let me just share that we do not have a active and functioning statewide Justice and Witness Action Network Delaware, but we anticipate that the engagement of our churches in our Faith and Democracy campaign this year hopefully will lead to that, as we pull them together and to do collaboration around this year's campaign. And also want to just highlight that we are in conversation right now with the Presbyterian Church, particularly their presbytery,
Right.
that covers the region of the Eastern Shore of Maryland and Delaware. They learned about our Faith and Democracy campaign and the work that we have done over the last election cycles, and they have sent us a formal letter expressing interest in wanting to be a part of this campaign and to work closely with us on this campaign. So we're in conversation with them about how that would work and how we can connect their local churches to our churches who are participating in this year's campaign. So let's take a look at how voting
But
is
I'll
done.
throw in there that it's also, remind everybody it's an opportunity to do ecumenical work, work within your ministerium with other, local churches where you could partnership with, and certainly many civic organizations who have similar goals and may not have a campaign that they can put together, but they could work with you on your campaign. So, so voting in Delaware is so gotta love all these multiple primaries. So, April 2nd for the presidential primary and September 10th for the state primary. Voter registration deadline for the presidential primary is March 19th. State primary voter registration deadline is August 17th. And early voting has to be posted 30 days before the election day. So you can see that one of the first things you probably want to do is figure out a calendar because you got a lot of dates to be remembering. So again, voting by mail, it lists there you're requesting your primary ballot, when that has to be returned, your state primary ballot, and when that has to be returned. So with the two different primary areas, I think that's an way you need to continue in your education to people so they realize that they're not just voting once, that they need to get out there.
Right. Let me add to this and say, let me add to this and clarify, Laura, that for the early voting, what actually happens is what I learned is that the early voting dates are posted on the website or announced 30 days before actual election day.
Thank you.
So, the dates are not known yet for early voting in Delaware. And to the question earlier from Reverend Derek Hodge, I think, looking at this sort of setup here in terms of how broken or how disconnected that voting happens in Delaware, again, I think this is an area that citizens can really sort of press and make it a little bit more streamlined, as well as more accessible, rather than having all of these different voting dates. It makes turnout that much more difficult if you got to have individuals to come out and vote on a different day for both of the primaries as well as for the local elections. But let me share the next one in terms of general election in Delaware. Pretty straightforward there.
Right. So you have voter registration deadline October the 12th for the November 5th general election. And if you want to vote by mail in the state of Delaware, you do have to request to get a ballot. It doesn't come to you automatically. So you have to request that by the 1st. But I think November 1st is optimistic that you're going to get it and be able to turn it around for November 5th. So I think, again, you might, within your own campaign, set an earlier date to really get people to do that.
So voting in Delaware definitely can be improved.
Yes, and also I think to Reverend Hodges' point, that I would just say that, remember, we're also trying to train people to vote on a regular basis. And so even if it seems like it's, a given in your election, you've got a lot of young people, a lot of disenfranchised people that you want to get on that process of voting and understand what being a citizen of a democracy is about.
Exactly. In Maryland, we do have an emerging Justice and Witness Action Network, Maryland. We're engaged in state legislative session right now. But as many of you may know, the conference boundaries for the state of Maryland includes 3 of our associations. So we're hoping to really build an organizing team with leadership from each of the associations so that we can coordinate our collective work that more effectively. So you'll be hearing more about that. And I know that there is a very active and engaged Justice and Witness Committee in the Potomac Association, and there is a Justice Committee in the Catoctin Association. So we're already well on our way in terms of organizing our work for the Faith and Democracy Campaign. Voting in Maryland looks like this.
Right. So our primary election is coming up in May, on May the 14th. Voter registration deadlines, you can register to vote online up until April 22nd, and by paper by April 23rd, and then up to May 13th in person, which means, and then again, if you end up having people who haven't registered when they walk into the polls to vote, they still can vote. And that's very important people to understand, that they can vote a provisional ballot, which will count once it's cleared that you're not double registering. So make sure people understand that they have that right. Early voting will run May 2nd through the 9th. And then you can see how you can request by mail. Again, has to be received by May 7th. If requesting online, it has to be received by May 10th. If requesting it in person, it must be received by May 14th. So you've got a lot of dates there. Return ballot deadline, you have to have it in by 8 p.m. on the date of the primary, the 14th. If you're taking it in person, if you're going to mail it, it has to be postmarked and received by 10 a.m. on Friday, the 24th. So again, remember that unfortunately, we can't always count on the U.S. mail to get places promptly. So encourage people not to be last minute in their mailing. And then our general elections November the 5th, voter registration deadline the 15th. And I see we're editing as we talk here. So I think, again, as I mentioned to everybody, I would encourage you to take this information and start mapping out a plan by dates. You know, as everybody knows, when you're putting together a project, you start with what your end date is and back yourself back. Some of us are, you know, quickly backing out because these primary dates are coming up. I would also echo remembering that your, you know, with the 2020 census, we had a lot of changes in districting. I know I moved into a new district and then my brand new congressman announced that he's retiring. So, you know, my election is changing as on a constant basis. So, you know, you want to keep up on those kind of things too. So New Jersey, we do have a campaign that we're trying to get local churches involved in and putting together organizing teams. Similar to Maryland, there's the 3 different regions, North, Central, and East. So we're really active in trying to identify people in the New Jersey churches who want to be involved and help us get that really active this year. Their primary election is June the 4th. Voter registration deadline is May the 14th. Or you could go to your polling place from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. So, and they also have early voting May 25th through June 2nd. And again, you want to double check what that polling place is. You also, in New Jersey, you have to request a ballot. You don't get one automatically. And if you request it, you have to do it by May the 28th. You can go in person to ask by Monday, June 3rd at 3 p.m. Return ballot drop off. And then general election also is the 5th of November. Early voter registration is October 6th through November 26th through November 3rd. And then you can also vote by mail, and there's dates there on how to do, where those are, and the dates that you have to reach the deadlines for. And here we are with Virginia, which is probably the most complicated of everybody in our groups. Again, we have a pretty good, I think we've got a great network going. We've got, you know, obviously a super partner in this area. So that's a big advantage that Virginia has. But we also represent, you know, 3 different associations that you want to work within your association, but then within the state as a whole.
We actually, Laura, have 2 associations. That third association's Region 3 is the Southern Conference. They were of the United Church of Christ. They partnered with us back in our 2022 Faith and Democracy campaign, and we anticipate that they will be working with us again in this year's campaign. So we worked closely as best as we could with the Eastern Virginia Association so we could have a statewide effort.
It's quite a Venn diagram if you put it all together.
Right.
How everybody comes over. So Virginia has primary elections for the state offices on June the 18th with the voter registration deadlines there. Early voting May 3rd through June the 15th. You can also request a ballot by mail. 2 different deadlines, as everybody seems to have, is, you know, if you're going to mail and request it, or if you're going to request it in person. And then also if you're going to mail it or drop it off when the deadline are. And in all the states, there is supposed to be the opportunity to request these things online, but as we know that we're not positive that works on every case. So the general election is November the
It's 5th. So it's-
we missed that on all our changes. And the voter registration deadline is October the 15th. And again, it says, as it notes here, you can vote by provisional ballot if you aren't registered by that date, but you still want to vote. So, and then there is, you do need to show your ID in Virginia to make sure that you can cast a ballot.
All right, so folks, that was a lot to share. I want to thank Laura for running through that as quickly as possible. And again, we will be providing further information on what she has went through, both on our website, and we will be creating some one-pagers that you can share within your local church and with citizens in your local community. But of course, accessing that information via your state or your county or local board of elections is critical. We are at 8 o'clock. We wanted to stop at 8, but we did start about 5 minutes behind just to allow all of you to join our session this evening. So let's take about 5 more minutes and see if we have additional questions or comments. And I see that, Gail, you have your hand up. And Gail, for those who don't know, is one of the co-chairs of our Virginia network organizing team. Gail.
I just wanted to clarify, it's not state offices, it's federal Congress and Senate that will be voted on in the primaries and in the general election of Virginia this year.
Great. So there's a question in the chat from Ellen. She says, I'm a Maryland voter and automatically received an application for voting by mail. Are you saying not everyone will receive this? There's been some conflicting information that we've been getting. I know that for the when we were in the midst of COVID and stay-at-home orders, that change was made for that particular moment where Maryland citizens receive their ballot in the mail. So don't hold our information to that. But what we learned when we checked the website is that that's not happening again this year since we're not in COVID and under stay-at-home orders. But we will check that again and follow up and make sure we have the correct information and share it with you. There's also another question in the chat from Diane. How can we get started writing postcards? My church wants to start as soon as possible. We will be sharing that information as soon as we get that information from Andrea. But Andrea, why don't you share a little bit of details right now? I think you have a website.
Yes. I'm going to drop the website into the chat. You can go to centerforcommonground.org/postcarding and find your regional rep. Your regional rep will either be Nancy Waugh or Roxanne Rucker. And then they will talk to you about, do you want to get an account on our electronic address disperser, or do you just want them to get you X number of addresses? There will also be instructions on how and where you can order supplies. All of that is on that page, and your regional organizer can help with anything.
Yes, and just to add a little layer to that, our Virginia network has been engaging in postcarding effectively since 2020. So they do that collaboratively with our UCC churches. So we encourage you not to do those postcarding in isolation. In fact, I'm pretty sure Gail and Lori are probably already talking with the organizing team about scheduling a specific training for our UCC local churches with the regional coordinator and doing that work together. In the past, the network has purchased postcards in bulk to make it cost effective for our local churches and distribute those postcards around to our local churches, as well as to support churches through some grant dollars to offset some of the cost of your postage for those postcards. So before you jump in by yourself as a local church, we encourage you to be in touch with our Virginia Network co-chairs, Gail Christie and Lori Forbes. I'm not sure if she's on tonight's session, but Gail is here. And Gail, if you could put your contact information in the chat. Again, Gail is the co-chair for our Virginia Network organizing team. And thank you, Andrea, you put in the organizer for the DMV area for postcarding. That's the person who we are in constant contact with about our collective work as the UCC in the DMV area, engaging in a postcarding initiative. Other questions, comments? I know that we have shared a lot of information with you tonight, and that's why we recorded this session. And that's why we are stressing that you sign up for the campaign because we want to be much more effective and efficient in our communications in this year's campaign. If you're signed up to campaign, you're going to be hearing from us regularly about the information that you need to have in order to do your work, but also connecting you with your state and regional action network so that you're doing this work in partnership with other UCC local churches in your state or your region. And then also keeping you engaged as part of our ongoing initiatives, whether it be voter registration, our voter education work, or our Get Out the Vote work. We want to make sure that you are part of the larger initiatives that are going to be happening. I'll give you one example. Back in our 2022 campaign, because we were clear about who was a part of the campaign, we were able to organize the United Church of Christ's grassroots present at the Poor People's Campaign National Mobilization on the Mall in June. It was us, the Central Atlantic Conference, that mobilized more than 125 justice leaders and clergy to show up in Washington, D.C. That was only possible because we were able to be clear about who was a part of the campaign and to mobilize them to be effective and to participate. So again, sign up for the campaign. If you've already signed up to the campaign in the past, feel free to sign up again and let us know that you're still with us. And we'll make sure that you're a part of our communications list so that you receive up-to-date information in a timely fashion to be engaged in this effort. And again, Lori and I are going to be available. In fact, Lori's going to be doing direct outreach to each local church that are part of this campaign to support you in developing your faith and democracy teams, as well as helping you to kick off your voter registration work as we focus on that in the spring months moving forward. Other questions, comments? Lori, anything you want to stress for all of these leaders that we will be working with together? Lori's been with us a couple of weeks now, so
I want to thank everybody for who's been doing this work for a very long time. I know there's lots of you on here who feel like that this never ends, and that can be, frustrating. I know. Also for coming out tonight to say you want to be part of this group, but remember, you're not. That's why we do this. That we're all here together. We can help each other out. We can brainstorm ideas together. But also remember, this is a really good time to recruit new people, because I think there are a lot of people are feeling uncomfortable with where we are right now as a democracy, and this gives them a way to take an active participation in helping to make sure that people are able to participate.
Well, thank you, everyone. We want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule this evening. You will be hearing from us on our next steps in working with you on this campaign. If you have any questions or concerns about how to move forward, you can contact myself at justiceaction@cacucc.org. That is the Justice and Witness Action Network email address, and Lori's email address is campaign organizer, if I can spell that correctly, cacucc.org. You can contact her as well, and though that information has been put in the chat. Thank you all for being with us, and we look forward to working with you this year on this important campaign of the Justice and Witness Action Network. Thank you. Take care.